special guest today. This is Dr. Visscher. He is a professor here at Dordt. Some of you maybe know him. He teaches, what do you teach? Astronomy, chemistry, geology, various earth sciences. You don't really fit in anywhere exactly, but right. But it's cool stuff. You get to use telescopes and all that. It's not, this boring humanities stuff. But anyway, I've invited him here just to sort of get us thinking about some questions as we enter into. I think it's going to be a challenging and hopefully exciting and provocative sort of discussion about the early chapters of Genesis and what that means for us and how we read it and all of that. So I'm just going to turn it over to Dr. Visscher and let him speak to you for a bit. And I encourage you to ask a lot of questions. This is the only time he's going to be here this semester. And so this is your chance to kind of, raise some good questions that you have about science and faith and the Bible and those kinds of things. And so, take advantage.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. This is fun for me to do because it's a little bit different context from what where I'm usually talking about these sorts of things. And I'm going to start out by just kind of cheating a little bit. As an astronomy professor, sometimes my fellow professors give me grief because all I have to do if things aren't going well, I'll just throw up a picture of a galaxy or something, and then it's like, this is all great, right? So I can be judged by the merits of creation, not by my own merits. But I just wanted to share with you a few of the things that are going on in science right now, some of the new discoveries that we're making. This is a picture of Pluto from New Horizons. If it's okay if I dim a little bit more here so you can see the detail on this. We didn't even know what this looked like a year ago. Okay? A year ago, Pluto was just this fuzzy ball, this dim point of light in the sky. Nothing like this. Now it's this whole new world, right, that we've discovered because of the flyby. This is the New Horizons spacecraft, flew by in July, passing by at 30,000 miles an hour. That's how fast the spacecraft is going. So it's taking pictures of Pluto, and then it's going off into the night on its own. Right? We're actually hoping it will be able to visit another object past Pluto further out. I think it'll get there in 2018. Just last week, it was proposed that there's actually another planet outside the orbit of Pluto. Pluto, as you know, has been demoted. It's no longer a planet. Have we heard about this? Does that make us kind of sad, right? Or is Pluto a planet? Raise your hand if you think Pluto's a planet. I think Pluto's a planet. Sure, what? Right, it's a name, right? Pluto doesn't care what we call it, right? But Pluto's been demoted, and now we have this planet 9, discovered by the person who claims to be, the person that killed Pluto. So this is sort of, doubly insulting to Pluto. But this has not actually yet been detected directly. Okay, it's been inferred by looking at the behavior and the motion of other planetary type objects out near the orbit of Pluto. And so now the hunt is on for this mysterious planet 9 from outer space, right? It's something like 10 times the mass of the Earth. So it's big, but it's way out there. It's very cold because it's way out there, and so it's going to be hard to see, but that search is on. And then again, with astronomy, I can just show pictures like this, right? This is Andromeda Galaxy. You can actually see this in the night sky if you have really nice dark skies. If you go out to the prairie or something, this is up sort of usually in the northern part of the sky. It looks like a little fuzzy patch of light. But this is the Andromeda Galaxy, and of course we live in a galaxy somewhat similar to this. Where am I going with all this? Well, this is starting to raise a lot of questions about what do we know about God from creation, but also questions that might pose some difficulties of just trying to navigate the waters here between faith and science. The Andromeda Galaxy is thought to be 2 million light years away. All right, that's the distance to this galaxy. This galaxy is pretty close as far as galaxies go, right? But the implication here is that it takes light time to travel this distance. In other words, the fact that I can even see this galaxy suggests that light had time to get from that galaxy to my eyeballs. All right. 2 million years worth of time. And that's a galaxy that's close by, right? So in astronomy, the further away something is from us, the further back in time we're looking, right? I'm seeing the people here in the front row. It takes light less time to travel that distance than those of you in the back row, because it takes time for light to travel the distance between objects, right? 2 million light years away, what does that tell us about creation? What do we do with that, right? So how do we navigate some of these waters here? And so I like to start with the Belgic Confession here, just to recognize that we know God by two means. First, by the creation, preservation, and government of the universe. So, I'm a science guy, right? So I'm the science guy coming in. But have we heard of the two books doctrine before? This idea of two books. How do we know God? Or how do we know what God is like? Have we heard about this?
The Bible.
The Bible, yes. Thank you. That's always a good answer. Is that like an answer? Does he ask this and that's always like the right answer, right? It's like, yeah, Jesus got the Bible. All right. So and I don't know what it would be for astronomy, right? Andromeda? Okay. So this idea, this two books idea, it comes out of this is articulated in the Belgic Confession. But it is this idea that we have God revealing himself in two main ways. The first, of course, is special revelation. Right? Which would be the Bible, it'd be Scripture, right? And our theology of how we interpret this, right? And then also, what I'm arguing here, and again, this is not an argument that's new with me, this idea of general revelation, that it is evident to all who open their eyes to the creation, that God is revealing something about himself in the creation, right? Something about his character. Right? Why are atoms made the way they are? I know, I see at least one of you who's in my chemistry class. Why are the electrons arranged this way? Think about that. That's God. That's how God liked it. Right? That's how God wanted it to be, as far as we can understand it. Right? So, the things we see in creation are telling us something about the one who created it. And so this is, of course, where we would look at science, which is one way of understanding this general revelation, a very systematic way of trying to understand this general revelation. Now, if there's one takeaway I hope you take from this all, is that there can be no conflict here in principle, right? Do we agree with that? Is that true in practice? Not always the case, right? But I want to be very clear here that I would assert that fundamentally there can be no conflict between our faith and what is revealed about God in general revelation, our science, all right? If we're interpreting both of those things correctly. I shared this story last time, so I'll share it with you guys as well. A couple years back, I had the opportunity to serve on a NASA panel on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., which sounds way cooler than it was. They basically locked us in a hotel conference room, and we had to read all these proposals for people trying to get money to do research exploring astrobiology, which is a new field thinking about, could we have life developing in other planetary environments, like on Mars, or Europa, which is the moon of Jupiter, or on planets orbiting other stars. And we know that there's at least a few thousand of these that we've discovered so far. And so we're talking about this origin of life stuff and the chemistry and biology of the origins of life. And we're sick of reading proposals, and we're stuck in this hotel. So a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, and an atheist walk into the bar. And I don't know if anybody's heard this story from me, because if you've taken one of my classes, you've probably heard this story. Because this sounds like a joke, right? But this actually did happen, right? And this is one of the most fascinating conversations I've ever had in my life. It was great, and I think And I hope that you all get a chance to have a conversation like that. But we're sitting there talking about this and sort of the implications of these things. And one of the guys there said to me, well, I was actually raised a Christian. And I knew all the right answers, from childhood as a Christian. But then when I got to college, I saw all this other stuff that was out there. And I had to make a choice. Right? And he felt like he had to choose. Well, you can either be a scientist or you can be a Christian, right? I hope if there's anything that you take away from this, that's not a choice that has to be made, all right? I would argue very forcefully that is not a choice that has to be made. And I'll say this probably 3 more times. If there's one thing you take away from this, right? But this is, to me, I think this is very important. We don't have to make this choice of science or faith, Christianity or studying the natural world. All right. Okay, so what do I mean by science? This is, this is the most lecture-y I hope this gets. So I'm giving you definitions, right? See, I'm learning from the humanities. I have to define like every term I'm using, right? That's all right, so science, how am I using the word science? It's a systematic investigation of the natural world. We're using observational and experimental evidence. And then a paradigm is the set of practices that define a scientific discipline at a certain point in time through various thought patterns that define that current science. It's somewhat circular. A paradigm is basically what are people thinking about current state of affairs in any particular field of science. I'll give you a very quick example from my own research. One of the things I'm studying is the origin of the moon. Right? So we're trying to figure out how was the moon made. And just take a moment and just think to yourself, if I was going to, the moon's there, right? You see the moon. Now just think, now how did it get there? Okay. So how did the moon get there? You tell me.
God put it there.
God put it there. I was waiting for that. Yeah. Now, did it just appear there? I'm trying to think of another example. There's a beautiful tree out here in the quad, right? Or it's not a quad, but I'll pretend it's a quad. Is it kind of quad-ish? All right. It's green. It's surrounded by buildings. Okay, how'd that tree get there? Someone planted it. How did it grow? Will of God. Can we describe how it grew in a different way? The seed.
Water, the sun, and the nutrients, and the sprouts, and then it grows.
Okay, so now think back to the moon. How'd the moon get there?
They say a burst of gas or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
They think a chunk of the earth somehow broke off and then went into space, but Earth's gravity kept it in check. That's a theory.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the very popular theories of lunar origin. So in my own field, what I'm looking at is answering these very questions. How was the moon made, right? Or how did it get there? So for a long time, she just described the fission hypothesis, which is this idea that the moon broke off out of the Earth and stayed in orbit around the Earth, right? And there's some attractive things about this hypothesis. Now, this all changed in the late 60s and early 70s. What happened in the late 60s and early 70s that would change our thinking about the moon?
You brought rocks back.
Yeah, we actually could go there and get rocks and bring them back, right? And study them and age them and measure their chemical and isotopic composition. And out of these Apollo missions, this new paradigm emerged. The current paradigm is this giant impact hypothesis. And this is this idea that the Earth is sitting there minding its own business, and some other planet-sized object comes in and smacks it. I heard somebody say wham. Some other planet-sized object comes in and smacks the Earth, breaks off all this debris. This debris collects over time and forms the moon that we see today. Right? It sounds crazy, right? But as far as we can tell, this appears to best match the evidence that we have based upon the physics of the Earth-Moon system and the chemical composition of the rocks that we see on the moon. Right? So this has caused a paradigm shift. This paradigm shift really took place in the early 1980s as people started to put together these scientific ideas from Apollo. So now today, if you're into lunar origins research, this is the paradigm that you will probably work within, these assumptions that this is how the moon is made. Right? If you take a chemistry class, I will talk to you about the paradigm of quantum mechanics. This is the current paradigm of what we think atoms look like. Right? So that's paradigm. And then cosmology, and if you're reading Walton, right? Walton loves cosmology, and so do I. Cosmology is what is your set of beliefs about the origin and large-scale structure of the universe. Right? And one of the points I hope I can make here is that these cosmological beliefs are pervasive. You hold them whether you really know it or whether you articulate it or not. Right? There's a great David Foster Wallace. Have we read any David Foster Wallace? So I highly recommend this. I actually think we should require this for every college-educated student and every Dort student. David Foster Wallace, he has a great college commencement called This Is Water. Go Google it and listen to it. I think it's recorded in audio, or you can download it and read it. But I'll start with the illustration he uses. There's two young fish swimming along, and they're minding their own business, and this older fish passes by them, and the older fish says to the younger fish, "Good morning, lovely water today, right?" And they continue on their way, and the two fish continue swimming, and one turns to the other and says, "What the heck is water?" Right? Get it? So they're swimming in this, right? They haven't articulated it, right? Every experience they've had is just from their own perspective, right? So whether we realize it or not, we hold to some set of beliefs about a cosmology that's pervasive. We are post-scientific people. We think scientifically about these sorts of questions, whether we realize it or not in many cases. Any questions so far?
What is Pluto since it's not a planet anymore?
What's Pluto since it's not a planet? Pluto is classified as a dwarf planet.
Oh, so it's still a planet?
It's still a planet, not a major planet, right?
Oh.
And there are a number of other dwarf planets. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of chunks of rock of various sizes in the solar system.
I'm the fish swimming in the water.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, questions about science, questions about this so far. Yeah.
How do you think the moon was made?
How do I think the moon is made? Well, that's an interesting question. I suppose you could say I subscribe to the giant impact theory, and the research that we do assumes this. This is the paradigm we're working in. And with all of this, please hear me. I hope it doesn't come across as, scientists just think they have the answer. No matter what with this stuff, on both sides of the equation here, we're going to be surprised. I'm pretty sure we don't have everything figured out. It's a very bold statement, right? But it does look like that's how it happened. Right? So let's, we can try to follow the evidence.
Well, do you try to link that to something that happened in history? When you look back at old texts and when you look back and try to see, did they record or write about some devastation that happened? And then you relate it.
Right. So the question is, can you relate something like this to recorded history? And with something like the moon, it's thought that this is happening way before humans.
So it would be recorded.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So it's a very bad day on Earth when this happens. If this happened, there's nobody around, no humans around to experience it. Yeah.
So there's a theory that the planetary mass that hit the Earth, it just, like the sun didn't capture it in its orbit, it just kind of flew through the
Yeah.
solar system?
Yeah. The question is, what about how this object, basically how did this object get there, right? It's thought that early in the solar system things are a lot more chaotic, and you have more things moving around, migrating a little bit. And what that will do is send asteroids and other objects flying around in different trajectories and different orbits. And the moon today is about 1% of the Earth's mass. So in terms of the Earth, it wasn't, it wrecked the Earth's surface pretty good, right? And it would have been melted in lava and magma. But the Earth's orbit seems to be relatively unaffected by this sort of impact. Yeah?
Do we see evidence on Earth's surface of collision? Like, how did it form back into the sphere?
Right, yeah. Do we see evidence of this on the Earth's surface? No. The answer is basically no. Because the Earth's surface is quite young because we have water and plate tectonics and other things and vegetation that is the Earth is basically continually resurfacing itself and recycling. So that has erased any record of this in the Earth's rocks. Other questions on that? All these great questions about the moon. Yeah.
But in relation to your arrows there, if you know God is the creator of all things, is he not the creator of the science as well as the revelation? Because he's the creator of everything.
Right.
So how can you then separate if he is the ultimate, if everything comes from him? Your knowledge comes from him. Whether
Right.
you discover something or not, he already knows of it. He just allows you to discover it.
Right.
And then he gives you the ability to investigate it even more, because everything goes to him.
Right. Yeah, and definitely you'll hear this phrase, all truth is God's truth, right? Now the question we all ask though is, are we sure that we've got, especially like if you're thinking about scientific questions, but also even our interpretations of Scripture, do we have it? Are we doing this right? Because we still are human. And yeah, I love this thing with Pluto. Like we're seeing these mountains on Pluto for the first time. God knew they were there, right? I mean, you can go nowhere He has not already been. So let me. I'm going to try to shift this a little bit as we think about our own cosmologies and our view of the world around us. Like as we look out and look at the world around us. So I always start my astronomy class with sort of this: what is the view from the Earth? So take a moment here. This is a little quiz. So this is my pop quiz for you guys. This is a thought experiment. Suppose you could see the stars during the day. Obviously we can't because the sun's too bright. The sky is blue, right? But suppose you could see the stars, and you go outside around noon and you see this. All right? That's at noon. In which constellation will the sun be found 6 hours later? So take a moment, you can chat with your neighbor. Tell me, 6 hours from now, in which constellation will I find the sun? You have some idea. You're going to have no idea. You have some idea. It's not a trick question. I would never do such a thing, right? Doesn't matter. It's spring. Actually, what is Gemini? Any Geminis in the room? What month were you born? May. Okay, it's May-ish. So I literally just asked you your sign, right? Sorry. All right, do we have an answer? Do we have a consensus? Where's the sun? Gemini, right? Now, where in the sky will the sun be at 6 p.m.? Down here, right? May-ish. So where will the sun be? 6 hours from now, the sun sets in the west, right? But so does Gemini, right? So through the course of one day, what's causing the sun to move in the sky? The Earth's rotation. Well, if the Earth's rotating, what happens to the stars?
They're moving.
They also move in the same way, right? Is that kind of a trick question? It's not a trick question, is it? Kind of? Right? All right, so the sun sets here at 6, so does Gemini, because it's the Earth's rotation that's making the sun move throughout the sky during the course of the day, right? This is this paradigm. You all have heard this. You know this, right? I mean, I know we don't think about this intuitively because we say the sun rises in the west, or the east, rises in the east, sets in the west, right? We also say, I'm going to dial somebody up, or would you tape that show for me, right? Right? But we're using the same language because this is the phenomenon that we observe from our perspective. So you can't blame ancient cosmologies for using this sort of language as well. On the top there, I'm quoting here, from the Psalms, or forget exactly where I got that now. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. So what do we do with a verse like that? Yeah.
Well, we'd interpret it in the context, like who was writing it and what the current rules were at the time.
Right. So do we take that verse, does that mean that the sun actually hurries across the sky, it sets, and then it hurries its way back and starts over again the next day, right? So now one of the points I want to make here is that your scientific worldview, I'm sorry, I'm trying to avoid using the word worldview this whole time, right? Your scientific views have already influenced how you read that verse, right? Whether you realized it or not, it already has, right? Because as far as we can tell, this is why the sun moves. This is why the constellations move during the course of the day, right? So this is very pervasive. We don't even realize it. This is just how we think, right? Here's another sort of quiz. Okay, we'll come back to this. What causes the seasons? I'm showing you in this image, right? What causes the seasons? The tilt of the Earth. The tilt of the Earth's axis, right? So the seasons are not caused by us getting closer to or further away from the sun. That's one of the most common misconceptions about the seasons. And there's a great clip, you can YouTube it, because it's from like the 80s. It's like Harvard grads are asked about seasons, right? And they all get it wrong, right? So they've just spent 4 years at a very prestigious educational institution, and they are asked, what causes the seasons? And almost all of them say, well, in the winter we're far away from the sun, and in the summer we're close to the sun. I think that causes the seasons. In reality, we're actually closest to the sun in January in terms of just distance, which doesn't feel like it, right? But we are tilted away from the Earth. In December 21 is when we reach the maximum angle tilted away from the sun. So that's why we have winter, northern hemisphere winter, in the December solstice there, and northern hemisphere summer in the summer. So, if I ask you now, now put yourself back in theology class or put yourself in Sunday school, what causes the seasons? God causes, right. And you see this, you read Job, there's storehouses, he causes the seasons. Paul alludes to this about the faithfulness of God. He's tapping into this idea of, there's a God, he's been faithful with the seasons, right? Is it like the unknown, the unknown God? He's giving testimony about himself based upon what we can see in the natural world. right? Okay, so that's your Sunday school answer. If you're in astronomy class and I ask you what causes the seasons, you say the tilt of the Earth's axis as it's in its orbit around the sun. Right? So my question is here, does the discovery of a scientific explanation affect our reading of the Bible? And or when is it appropriate to let science influence our biblical interpretation? Is it ever appropriate?
Yeah.
Sometimes, maybe, yeah. Yes.
Excuse me. I think because most of the
That's you.
when the Bible talks mostly about creation in Genesis 1, they didn't even know like that. Maybe they thought the Earth was flat, so they couldn't have known like tilt of the Earth causes the seasons. And whenever we read about creation in like the Psalms, it's all poetry and stuff. So maybe not like just realizing that it's poetry. Like if we just discover these science things, maybe we'll just realize it's poetry and stuff.
Right. So obviously, and I'll talk about this a little bit too. Their cosmology is much different from ours, and we do have to be a little careful here too, right? I mean, do we just do this with everything, right? So obviously, I think it's obvious to some extent our scientific views do influence how we read the Bible. It's unavoidable. It's pervasive. But to what extent is that appropriate? I'll ask sort of a related question. Does the discovery of the mechanism of some natural phenomenon diminish God's role in that phenomenon? Yeah.
I think it would shed light onto how it happens, and personally, I think it makes it more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I think if anything, like, it makes us more aware of how freaking awesome God is. Like, for him to be able to put all this complex stuff together and just, so it all works perfectly that we're alive on Earth. Like, just even the chances of us living on Earth is crazy. And he just made it all work together. He is the creator of the mechanism. Like, I think if anything, it should, like, make us respect him even more.
Other comments? Other thoughts? Do we feel disappointed in some way if some of the, if we figure something out?
Never eureka moment, like, wow.
So I hope this.
But even the tilt, what's keeping it from going off of that rotation? What's keeping it
Right.
in that point, that place? So you have to,
Right. The faithfulness of God,
Exactly.
also the conservation of angular momentum.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's
Right. So let me.
I mean, just like Adam named all the animals, you can name it whatever you want to name it, but anyway, ultimate power.
Right.
Okay.
So let me, and this is kind of what I'm trying to get at. There's no such thing, it's very easy for us to think of like, I see a picture of the galaxy. Wow, God, it's awesome, that's miraculous, that's awesome, right? And then you see a tree outside getting new leaves in the spring. Oh, it's spring, right? I think we far too easily accept the everyday as sort of being mundane. Right? Well, that's just kind of the natural thing, and then like this part of creation or this massive thing that I can't quite explain, that somehow is painting a better picture of God than sort of the mundane everyday details in Chemistry 101 or 111 or whatever it might be, right? I would argue that those details are every bit as majestic as the pictures of the galaxies. Related to this story, I'll share this little story. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and it's really sad because she's starting to get too old now. Too old, right? Or if she has like a cut or something, right? All right, so if she has a cut, or if she scrapes her knee or something, she comes running to mom or dad, and what do we do, right? Okay, I say, well, it's okay, honey. You know, we just have to wait for the proteins in your bloodstream to start coagulating the blood, right? And we have to get these fibrin molecules start, you know, these activation enzyme chains going, and it'll be fine, right? Don't worry about it, right? And this is beautiful. It's all this biochemistry, right? Is that right? Is that helpful for her?
No.
What do, right? We kiss the owie, right? And we put a Band-Aid on it, even if there's no blood, right? Like, those Band-Aids are amazing, especially if they have, like, you know, a princess on them or something. You know, like Princess Leia is a Disney princess now, right? You know this, right? So this is mind blown, right? All right, so we put the Band-Aid on it, we kiss it, we say, it'll be okay, God will take care of it, God will fix it, right? So which one of those two, you know, so I can tell my daughter, I can give her the biochemical pathway. I don't know biochemistry that well, so I was just kind of winging it there, right? Or I can tell her, it'll be okay, God will fix it, right? Which one of these descriptions is true?
Both of them?
Both of them. Right. I'm using a different story for each approach, right? Does God use that biochemistry to do this? Absolutely. And it's amazing, right? That's not helpful for her in that moment, right? But they're both true. All right, let's think about this in terms of Hebrew cosmology. Have you seen this now? Or you have this on your discussion sheet? Yeah, you do, because you have this sheet, Professor Lappinger?
They haven't had to read that far yet.
Okay, you'll get to it. It'll be good stuff, all right? So what we can do is we can think about how did the Hebrews look at the world? What's the ancient Near Eastern cosmology? And so what we're going through here, these are the different paradigms, or these are the cosmologies within which the Bible is being written. Now, I don't even have to say that this is the biblical cosmology. I could just say this is the cosmology that is in place when the Bible is being written. All right? If you're a human and you think about what's going on and you live in the ancient Near East, this is your picture of the cosmos, insofar as you thought about the material cosmos. Right? And you see there's the floodgates of heaven, the lower waters, Sheol's below that, you have the pillars of the earth. So if you asked somebody back then to describe the material or the physical structure of the creation, they would probably describe something like this. But I don't know if the question would even make sense to them. Right? And Professor Lappinger probably can say more about that than I can. All right? So this held for a long time. All right? And like many other ancient worldviews, and like many of our own sort of, you know, if you listen to this too, our default position is that we are the center of the universe, each one of us, right? And he makes the point, you know, after all, every experience I've had has been from my perspective. Right? So we see this carried out in sort of this geocentrism. So the ancient Greeks had this geocentric model of the cosmos. The earth is obviously at the center of the universe. Right? And that makes sense from that Greek perspective, right? If I stand outside, I see the sun, what does the sun do? It sets and hurries back to where it started. It does it all over again. What do the stars do? Rotate around me. Right? What do the planets do? They rotate around me, right? So everything, from my perspective, rotates around the earth. They did not even know about galaxies. A galaxy wasn't a thing until the early 20th century. Like, we didn't even know what a galaxy was, right? So this very earth-centered view, this geocentric view. So this would have been held by everybody, any right-thinking individual, including, you know, probably like St. Augustine and Martin Luther and various others, up until some cracks in that model, starting especially in 1543, when Copernicus published his heliocentric model. And this is the idea that the sun is actually at the center of the universe. Well, in this case, the cosmos, the solar system. Again, we didn't know about other galaxies and all these other things at this point. So the sun's at the center, and the Earth orbits the sun, as do all of the other planets. Right? So this dramatically shifted this cosmological picture. Right? And this is the view that we would hold today. Right? We do generally accept that the Earth does indeed orbit the sun, as do all the other planets. So a few questions to be thinking about. And as we have time here, we can discuss this, or I can open up this for questions in a bit here too. How does our modern worldview differ from that of an ancient Near Eastern culture? And what are the different emphases? Are we thinking about material origins, or a physical mechanism? If I'm thinking about the origin of the moon, am I thinking about the mechanism, the physics and chemistry of how that happened? Or what is its function? Is it a light in the night to keep track of seasons and times? Another question that Walton asked is, was new or prescient information offered to the Israelites? Did they know something about the natural world that their contemporaries would not have known? In other words, was Moses given any sort of sneak peek into a Copernican model? All right. Well, this is the question I really want to start thinking about, have you think about a little bit. These are these three paradigms. You have the Hebrew paradigm, the Greek geocentric paradigm, and this Copernican model. Which one of these should we consider to be the most biblically correct? Or more generally, which one of these is the most correct? If you're a Christian living today, or what if you're a contemporary of Martin Luther and this is the prevailing cosmology? Or if you're a Christian even earlier, right? Because everybody, including Christians up until the late 16th century, this was the correct cosmology. Right? In fact, the church even pushed against this cosmology. Not as bad as people make it out to be, but there was resistance against this paradigm shift. Right? So which one of these is correct? Which one is the most biblically correct? Is there a distinction? I know this, I'm being deliberately vague, okay? But which one should we consider to be the most biblically correct? What do we do with this?
As far as Genesis is concerned, how it's described in Genesis?
Sure. In Genesis, so
It'll be the first one, because that's the way they saw it, that it was just divided by a firmament.
okay,
It's like you could reach up and,
but isn't that wrong though?
well, since we explored and put astronauts up there, we can say it's wrong.
What do we mean by wrong though, right? So
What's their knowledge?
right. So what's their knowledge? Were they given any prescient information? What do we consider to be true? Right? And how do we?
It's not true. That's your decision. That could change.
Right, and this can change too.
You just
Now,
found a blue planet.
this is probably pretty solid because we can step, we can go and we can send spacecraft out and observe our planet from a distance and see this happening, right? So that's pretty solid now. But what I want you to be thinking about is what is truth, and how are we defining how true truth is, right? Or what type of truth is it? Is it a kiss on the Band-Aid and saying God will make it better, or do we have to make this distinction, or can we look at both in some way? Right? So I'd be happy. We have a few minutes here. You can discuss this or ask any other questions you might have, faith and science, or talk about this stuff. Any questions? Yeah.
I know it's kind of a touchy subject, but what is your thought on the origin of the universe, on how you believe it to be?
I'm cutting right to it, right? So how old do I think the universe is? What do I think about the origin of the universe? I'll put it this way. I think creation is a pretty reliable witness of truth. I think that we can comprehend the creation and that we can gain knowledge from our study of it. And so I lean toward what we see is what we get. If we're talking in terms of a physical explanation for the origin of the universe, it looks old. From our perspective, the way it looks pretty old. Now, what does that mean in how we read Scripture? That's where we have to start thinking about, well, what do we do with these different stories, right? But again, I would still go back to this. We know ultimately there's no conflict there, but how do I navigate those differences?
Well, I appreciate you because
Thank you.
it also goes back from background. Well, people laugh when you respond to me, but I had no knowledge of the cosmos and all that kind of stuff in my upbringing. In my upbringing, we weren't allowed to read astrology, Aries, or whatever, because that we were told that's witchcraft, that's evil. But in becoming an adult and then researching, you look at it as a different aspect, you look at it differently. Because even when you see how the sun rises and sets, I didn't know that
Right.
that coincided with that. And I'm just coming into the light of that. So my knowledge is forever changed. But you have to look at the person's background and where they were raised, how they were raised, and even their education, what they were exposed to. And I have never heard of this in this context. So that's why I'm asking those questions.
No, that's
But
great.
I appreciate the knowledge you're giving me
Yeah,
and the instruction.
thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? You have plenty of time here. We have like 2 minutes of. Any other questions? Yeah.
We often see how like science in the Bible, how that can sneak, like you said with your one colleague, that when they saw science, they separated from the Bible, and you see that often where people, they make a split off that. Do you see it being the case in the future or even now, where by going after science a lot, they go and actually become a Christian? Because I know like Francis Collins,
Right.
he was an atheist first, and then through his study of science, he became a Christian. Do you see that becoming the case?
Yeah, that's a really good point and a good question. Do people ever get back here from this path?
Yeah.
Right? And there are examples of that. And there's been a lot of writing done in the last few years about this idea of fine-tuning, just how remarkable it is that we have this planet. The Earth, it really is Goldilocks, right, in a lot of ways. And we talk about the zone of habitability around other stars. You can't be too hot, you can't be too cold, you're just right. And there's all these various physical constants that have to have just the right value. Now, and that has led some people to say, well, there has to be some other greater power at play here. A very common response now, we're starting to see some of the cosmology go in this direction, is, well, we're simply one of many possible multiverses, but that's a whole other discussion. But to answer your question, yeah, this has happened, where people have come to at least a theistic perspective through the study of the natural worlds, which is encouraging, because I think it's awesome.
Would you join me in thanking our guest